So I told you a little bit about the eastern side of the sunken road. Up here on the western side. So up here on the eastern side, as the fighting began to subside down there, French's division in the attack, Rhodes's brigade for the Confederates reinforcing that, the attention shifted here, and the Union division of Israel Richardson began the attack along this part of the sunken lane. It was now 10:30. Robert E. Lee realized that his line here in the sunken road was beginning to waver. Lee made a very momentous decision. Lee decided to send his only reserve division into the battle, 3,400 men under Major General Richard H. Anderson. By the way, one of the regiments in that was the 22nd Georgia. My great-great-grandfather was in that regiment, fought here from this end. Lee knew that he had to extend the line of D.H. Hill to the right in order to meet what was an attempted envelopment. So what Richardson's division was attempting to do is move to their left, to the right of the Confederate line, and basically get this line in enfilade. Well, enfilade fire down the line. You can see if you got around, you may ask this question, no, the tower was not here at the time of the battle. You got around on this side, you could fire right down the line and you could completely devastate the defenders of that line. So Lee knew he had to extend his line out. He sent Anderson's division in, but they had just arrived in Sharpsburg just before sunrise on the morning of September 17th after marching from Harper's Ferry. They were one of Stonewall Jackson's divisions that was at Harper's Ferry. Anderson's men were met by Richardson's division of 4,000 men. Now, saying that Anderson had 3,400 men is probably a gross overstatement. They've just marched 17 miles through the night from Harper's Ferry. I think they still have 3,400 men. Probably not. So there were a lot of stragglers. Richardson's division was led in the attack by the unit known as the Irish Brigade. Brigadier General Thomas Meagher. He's right here, handsome looking fellow. As they advanced over the swales, and that's one of the reasons I wanted you to see, as we walked through, we stopped at different points, okay? There are swales. There's up and there's down and there's sideways. It is a very undulating terrain, as they say. As they advanced over these swales in the fields running the sunken road, the emerald green flags snapped in the breeze. One of the regimental chaplains was Father William Corby, and he rode on his horse back and forth in front of the formation of the Irish Brigade, shouting the words of conditional absolution prescribed by the Roman Catholic Church for those who were about to die. Now, Corby would later perform that same service at Gettysburg. You see the movie Gettysburg, you actually see him giving mass at Gettysburg. Corby would also go on to become president of Notre Dame later after the war. The mostly Irish immigrants lost 540 men to the heavy volleys before they were actually ordered to withdraw. This was extremely bloody. Now, Meagher was a fascinating character. Did you pass this down the line? Look out. Okay, he was a fascinating character. He was born in Ireland in 1823, and he became an Irish nationalist and a leader of the Young Irelanders in the Rebellion of 1848. After being convicted of sedition, he was first sentenced to death, but then he received transportation for life to Australia. How about that? Put you to death, or you can go to Australia for the rest of your life. In 1852, however, he escaped and he made his way to the United States, where he settled in New York City. And there he studied law, worked as a journalist, and traveled to present lectures on the Irish cause, and he got married for a second time. At the beginning of the Civil War, he raised troops for the Union and eventually became the commander of the Irish Brigade here at Antietam. He fought with distinction during the remainder of the war, especially here at Antietam, and then on to Fredericksburg, where he overcame charges of being drunk during the battles. I'm Irish, and I find that hard to believe. No Irish guy's going to be drinking, right? At the beginning of, tragically, I don't mean to laugh about it. Tragically, After surviving the war, Meagher died falling overboard from the steamboat Thompson into the Missouri River during the early evening of July the 1st of 1867.
Drunk.
Hey, it's my people. What can you say? All right. So what happens here is the fighting stalls out. However, what happens first is after John Gordon is carried off the field, there is confusion in the ranks on the far end of the sunken road. Someone gives a command that is misunderstood, telling folks to withdraw, so the Confederates begin to withdraw across Piper's cornfield. You'll see Mr. Piper's orchard over there. It's being nicely replanted by the Park Service. It is a very desperate situation here because this line is about to completely collapse, the Confederate line. However, what you can't see from here, but at the edge of that cornfield on top of the hill right in front of the orchard, there was a Confederate artillery battery. James Longstreet, the Confederate wing commander or corps commander, actually rode up to those cannon with his staff. He got off. He had hurt his feet. He's actually wearing slippers at the time of the battle. He got off of his horse. He told his staff, "Here, I'm going to hold your horses. You guys get out there and man these cannons and put fire down here on this road." And they did. So Longstreet's staff actually manned those guns and helped. Again, artillery helped Lee turn the tide, at least stem the retreat here. So by late morning, the lines had actually stabilized, and the Confederates still held the Piper farm, even though the Union troops were in this lane. And there were so many casualties in this sunken road that it was said that you could walk from one end of it to the other without ever stepping on the ground by walking across bodies.
Earlier you mentioned about the drums on the Union side, like behind the Union.
The band.
Yeah, the band. So wouldn't that have been effective? Because to me, I think that's what the drums were there for. The drums were there to push and motivate the people and signal the people, because, like maybe...
They did use them sometimes, but you gotta remember something. It is so loud now after the battle's engaged here. It is so loud. You're never going to hear drums. You're not going to hear a bugle. Things get extremely confused.
Oh, yeah.
The best you can do is the commander shouting commands.
And I was looking at it from a different way. It was like they were overdressed for the occasion. They had brand new. The bayonets were shiny. They were dressed for a funeral. It was just.
So the French's division is primarily green. They're primarily new troops, fresh uniforms, fresh equipment.
Fresh everything.
Yep, coming into this battle. The Confederates in this sunken lane are all hardened veterans. They've been through a lot of fights. Yeah, it's amazing they were able to hold that long. Okay, questions? So we have actually now been through the 2 of the 3 phases of the battle. As I said, the line stabilized here by about noon. There are some things going on in the southern end of the battlefield that we're going to go down to this afternoon and talk about, but they really have no impact yet on what's been happening up here. In fact, Lee has been pulling troops from the southern end of the battlefield to reinforce the center and to reinforce the north, and so Lee's line in the south has become extremely thin. In fact, down there holding the bridge over the Antietam, the lower bridge over the Antietam Creek, are only about 400 to 500 Georgians.
Did they have how were they able to transport the people that, from one end, from the southern end to the running? They didn't build a wagon, an MTV wagon with 5 horses pulling it. That would have been effective though, right?
No.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of trails.
Did you hear the conversation about horseflesh earlier?
Yeah.
That's no way. The demand for horseflesh far exceeded the supply.
That's fine.
So they did move troops on trains. First battle in the war at Bull Run. The Confederates moved them from the valley.
The Unions started destroying their train tracks, right?
Well, yeah, that too, absolutely. Now, once the bridge over the Moxie was restored, there was a lot of resupply here.